Coming live from the studio, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for watching another episode of All Sports. This is your host, Gerardo. On the show today, I am going to talk about my experience at Rogers Center. To start off, at the middle every month, I post a video or talk about one stadium I went to. So stay tuned for future videos from stadiums across the US. For the month of June, I am going to post a video where I talk about Rogers Center and my experience there. For the next 30 months, I will go in order and tell you about every stadium I have been to across the US. When I post a video talking about a stadium I've been to, there will be two different versions. It will be a video where I talk about the stadium if I have already been there, but if it's a stadium I haven't been to yet, then I will post a video showing you the stadium. To start off, right now I'm going to give you some background history about Rogers Center. Rogers Center is located in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It is the home of the Blue Jays, the Major League Baseball team, but it's also been the home of other teams in the past. It has been the home of the Raptors, the NBA basketball team from 1995 to 1999. It has also been the home of the Bills when the Bills have played a regular season game or a preseason game there. It has also been the home of other teams as well, regardless if it's a team from the US or from Canada. But Rogers Center has been the home of many teams, and it has hosted many teams in different types of events in the past. Rogers Center is located next to the CN Tower. They broke ground for Rogers Center in October of 1986, and it opened in June of 1989. It has a seating capacity of over 49,200 seats for Blue Jays games, and it can be expanded up to 55,000 seats for other events. Rogers Center hosted the 1991 Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Rogers Center was the first stadium to have a fully retractable motorized roof. There is a 348-room hotel attached to Rogers Center, and 70 rooms have a view of the inside of the ballpark from the hotel rooms, since the hotel is inside the stadium out in center field. Rogers Center was the last North American Major League stadium built to accommodate football and baseball. When you go to Rogers Center, make sure you go to the CN Tower, since they are located next to each other. And Toronto is known for the CN Tower. And if you're into attractions when you travel to a city, but you like to go up some of the tallest skyscrapers, no matter where it is in the world, the CN Tower is a must for you to go visit and go up to the top. The CN Tower is one of the top attractions in Toronto and in all of Canada. But the CN Tower isn't just known in Toronto and in Canada. It's known around the world, especially for being one of the tallest skyscrapers in the world and being one of the tallest optionary decks in the world as well, because of how high visitors can go to overlook the city of Toronto, and because of how tall the CN Tower is. So if you go to Toronto, regardless if you're a Blue Jays fan or not, you definitely want to check out Rogers Center, especially if you are a baseball fan. I would highly recommend that you go to Toronto during the summer or when the Blue Jays are playing. But make sure you check out Rogers Center if you're a baseball fan, and also if you are someone that wants to visit all 30 Major League Baseball stadiums. Rogers Center in Toronto definitely needs to be on your list. Also, you have to check out the CN Tower in Toronto. You have to check out all of the top attractions Toronto has to offer, because Toronto is one of the cities, especially if you travel international, that a lot of foreigners go and travel to and visit. And for Toronto being an international destination, it's also one of the top cities in the world that tourists and foreigners visit because of what Toronto has to offer. And after I visited Toronto, there's no doubt that Toronto was one of my favorite cities to visit, but especially as being an international traveler, Toronto was definitely one of my favorite cities to go and visit. So, regardless if you're a baseball fan or not, but you like to travel, you definitely need to go to Toronto and see Toronto because of what it has to offer. And I would highly recommend that you go to Toronto during the summertime. So what I liked about Rogers Center, well, there was a lot to like about Rogers Center. So I went to Rogers Center back in July of 2016. And right away, what I liked about Rogers Center is that it's in the heart of downtown Toronto. Also, it's located right next to the CN Tower. So I went to Toronto during the summertime, and I definitely checked out a Blue Jays game at Rogers Center, and I definitely went up to the top of the CN Tower to see the CN Tower, but to also see the view that you get of Toronto from the top of the CN Tower, since the CN Tower overlooks Toronto. So the day I went to the Blue Jays game, I got 2 for the price of 1, because I got to go to a Blue Jays game at Rogers Center, and I also went to the top of the CN Tower, since Rogers Center and the CN Tower are located right next to each other. There was no doubt that Rogers Center was one of my favorite baseball stadiums to visit, and Toronto was also one of my favorite cities to visit. Especially, Toronto was one of my favorite international cities to go and visit. And I would highly recommend that you check out Toronto. It's definitely a city that's worth seeing. There's a reason why Toronto is ranked towards the top of the list as one of the top destinations to go to in the world for international travelers, especially because of everything Toronto has to offer. Now, when I went to Rogers Center, it was during the summer in July of 2016. And the game that I went to, I made sure that it was a day game. Now, there was a reason why I chose a day game instead of a night game, but there was also another reason why I wanted to go during the summertime. Before I went to Toronto and before I got to go see Rogers Center in person, I have always seen Blue Jays games on TV, and I also seen pictures and videos of Rogers Center on the internet. And what I noticed about Rogers Center was that it was a really nice and unique stadium that had a lot of different features that other Major League Baseball stadiums and even other stadiums don't have to offer. Now the reason why I chose the day game was because after watching Blue Jays games on TV and seeing pictures and videos of Rogers Center on the internet, I noticed that during the summertime, especially if it's a day game, there is a great chance that the roof will be open. Luckily, since I chose a day game, the roof was open. Now the reason I wanted to go to a day game was because I was hoping the roof was open. But since the roof was open, it was one of my favorite Major League Baseball stadiums to go to. And that was also one of my favorite games to go to after I had the opportunity to go to that day game at Rogers Center. Now the reason why that was my favorite game to go to out of all the Major League Baseball stadiums I've been to was because the roof was open. And let me tell you something. When the roof is open at Rogers Center, especially if it's a day game, it's definitely worth going to a Blue Jays game. Because regardless of where you're sitting in the stadium, but especially if you're sitting in the upper deck, you get a really nice view of the Blue Jays game. And you get to see the whole entire Rogers Center. Especially if you're in the upper deck. Or even if you're sitting behind the first or third base side or behind home plate. But when that roof was open, I got two for the price of one. Because I got a nice view of the Blue Jays game and a nice view of Rogers Center. Because I chose tickets to sit in the upper deck. But because the roof was open, I got a really nice view of the CN Tower to the side of Rogers Center. And if you look up, regardless of where you're sitting in Rogers Center and the roof is open, you can see the tall CN Tower go up to the sky from above Rogers Center. So there was no doubt that Rogers Center was one of my favorite stadiums to go to. And one of the reasons was because of the unique features that Rogers Center has to offer. And some of the features that you see at Rogers Center, you will not see at other Major League Baseball stadiums or even at other stadiums around the world. Now, if there's one thing I can recommend, sitting in the upper deck at Rogers Center, especially if the roof is open, is definitely worth it. But even if the roof is open and you're not sitting in the upper deck, you still will get a really nice view of the Blue Jays game and of the CN Tower. But in the upper deck, it's even a better view when you get those two features while watching a Blue Jays game. So there's no doubt that sitting in the upper deck at Rogers Center was definitely worth it. Now, what really makes Rogers Center unique is the hotel that was built inside of Rogers Center. And Rogers Center is one of the only stadiums, or even the only stadium around the world, that has a hotel inside of the stadium. But what makes that hotel unique about Rogers Center is that there's rooms, which is 70 rooms that face into Rogers Center. And if you're sitting in Rogers Center and you look out towards center field, you will see the hotel with all the the glass windows to the hotel rooms. And if you're staying in the hotel and you were lucky to get one of the 70 rooms that faces into Rogers Center, you get a really nice view of Rogers Center and of the field. And if the Blue Jays are playing, you could even sit in your hotel room and look out the window and watch the Blue Jays game. Now tell me, what other Major League Baseball stadium or any other stadium around the world has that feature or that option of you staying in your hotel room and your hotel room faces into a stadium? And all you got to do is look out the window and you can watch a game. The only stadium that I know that has that feature is Rogers Center. So that was definitely what made Rogers Center unique, was having that hotel inside of the stadium. And if you get to go to Toronto and you're lucky enough to stay at that hotel that is inside of Rogers Center, hopefully you are lucky enough to have one of the 70 rooms that faces into Rogers Center. And if you get that opportunity, it's definitely worth it, no matter how much it costs. And if you get that opportunity, make sure the Blue Jays are there, because you could be sitting in your hotel room and looking out the window and watching a Blue Jays game. There is no other stadium that you can do that at. So staying at that hotel inside of Rogers Center is definitely worth it if you get that opportunity. Now overall, Rogers Center is a nice Major League ballpark. And it's also a really nice stadium that's located in Toronto, Canada. So if you get the opportunity, you definitely need to go to Toronto. Check out Toronto. Regardless if you're a Blue Jays fan or not, you definitely need to check out Rogers Center, especially if you're someone that wants to see all 30 Major League Baseball stadiums. You definitely need to see Rogers Center and all the unique features that stadium has to offer. And let me tell you one more thing about Rogers Center. If you get the opportunity to go and watch a Blue Jays game there, you will not be disappointed. Even if you go to Rogers Center and watch a different event happen at that stadium, you will not be disappointed. And there's no doubt that the people of Toronto, and even the people of Canada, the people that live in Toronto are some of the best fans in sports. And regardless of what Toronto team it is, the Toronto fans, for all their teams, are some of the most loyal fans you'll see in sports. And they all root for all their hometown teams in Toronto. So Toronto has very loyal fans, regardless if it's the Blue Jays, the Raptors, or the Maple Leafs. And after we've seen the Raptors win the NBA Finals, that should tell you right there that Toronto has very loyal fans, and they root for all their teams regardless of what team it is. So if you get the opportunity, you definitely need to check out Rogers Center in Toronto. It's definitely worth seeing with all the unique features that it has now and some of the unique features that it had in the past. What made Rogers Center unique was the playing surface that it currently has, and even the playing surface that it had in the past. Rogers Center has never had natural grass. It's always had AstroTurf or a different type of turf, and it doesn't have natural grass. So the playing surface has always been unique at Rogers Center. Another thing that was unique about Rogers Center was another feature on their playing surface that they had up until the 2016 season. If you looked at the baseball diamond when the Blue Jays were playing home games in Toronto at Rogers Centre, the areas where the plates were, for example, home plate, first base, second base, and third base, had dirt around the plates. But there was no baseball diamond, and the rest of the field was grass up until the 2016 season. Before the 2016 season, the Blue Jays had a renovation that off-season, and they installed a baseball diamond. And now, if you look at pictures of Rogers Centre, they have the traditional baseball diamond around the whole entire playing surface. And the baseball diamond doesn't look like it used to look like a few years ago or in the past when Rogers Centre first opened. So that was another thing that was unique about Rogers Centre, was what their playing surface used to look like up until the last few years. And with the playing surface that Rogers Centre used to have in the past, they were one of the only stadiums in Major League Baseball, with only a few other stadiums, that had that type of playing surface. So regardless if it's the interior or the exterior of Rogers Centre, the unique features that Rogers Centre has is what makes Rogers Centre unique, with the type of features they have, but also those features makes a case for why Rogers Centre is a must-see stadium, regardless if you go see a Blue Jays game there or any other type of event at Rogers Centre. There is no doubt that Rogers Centre is definitely worth seeing. And if you're a baseball fan, you definitely need to check out a Blue Jays game at Rogers Centre, regardless if you're a fan or you're not a fan of the Blue Jays. So if you get the opportunity to go to Toronto, check out downtown Toronto, go to all the top attractions, and go to the Toronto Islands that overlook the city. You definitely need to check out the CN Tower, but you also need to check out the Toronto Islands that overlook Lake Ontario and the city of Toronto. And regardless if you go to the Toronto Islands during the day or at night, you get a really nice view of downtown Toronto from the Toronto Islands. But I would highly recommend that you go to the Toronto Islands at night, because of the view that you get from the Toronto Islands of downtown Toronto from those islands. It's one of the best views that you'll ever get of a city anywhere around the world. And that view is definitely a must see, with the way the lights reflect off of Lake Ontario at night, and with the view that you get of downtown Toronto with the lights reflecting off the buildings. It's definitely a must-see. So you definitely need to check out the Toronto Islands that overlook Lake Ontario and downtown Toronto. You definitely want to see it during the daytime, but especially at night. The view of downtown Toronto from the Toronto Islands is breathtaking, and it's one of the best views that you'll get of a city anywhere around the world. Tune in at the middle of July to find out which was the next stadium I visited, and I will also tell you about my experience at that stadium. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next week. I want to say thank you to everybody that watches every episode of All Sports. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.